Hey everyone, and welcome. If you're getting ready for competitive exams, you know how crucial it is to get inside those dense RBI reports. Well, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving deep into one of the biggest stories of our time, India's digital payment revolution. And we're going to break it all down for you, straight from Chapter 3 of the RBI's latest report on currency and finance.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let me just throw a number at you. 45 crore. Any guesses? Well, that, my friends, is roughly the number of UPI transactions that happen in India every single day. It's just massive. And that's the scale of the revolution we're about to explore.
So here's how we're going to tackle this for your exams. We've got 6 key sections. We'll start with the big global picture, then zoom into India's incredible journey. After that, we'll hit the mind-boggling numbers, analyze the real-world economic impact, look at the challenges ahead, and wrap it all up with a super handy revision guide. Let's get started. Okay, kicking things off with Section 1, the global picture. To really get why India's story is so special, we first have to see what's happening on the world stage. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because it kind of flips the usual script. We often think of developed nations leading tech waves, right? But in digital payments, it's actually the emerging market economies, the EMEs, that are out in front. Think India, Brazil with its PIC system, Kenya with M-Pesa. They're the ones setting the pace. That's a fantastic point to make in an answer. So what was India's secret sauce? Well, a huge part of it was this strategic choice right here, going with an open-loop system. What that means, in simple terms, is that everything works together. It doesn't matter if you use PhonePe and your friend uses Google Pay, or if you bank with SBI and they bank with HDFC, it just works. This is totally different from a closed-loop system like China's Alipay, where you're kind of stuck inside one company's world. That interoperability was an absolute game changer for getting everyone on board. And that brings us to some key jargon you absolutely have to know for your exams, A2A RTP. It stands for account-to-account real-time payments. It's just a fancy way of saying money zips directly from my bank account to your bank account, instantly, with no middleman. And here's the kicker. By transaction volume, India's UPI is the biggest A2A RTP system in the entire world. All right, that sets the global context. Let's move on to Section 2 and zoom in on India's own story. How did we get here? Let's look at the key moments and policies that paved the way. What this timeline shows so clearly is that this was not some overnight miracle. It was a long, deliberate journey. You can see the building blocks being laid down decade after decade, from automating checks back in the 80s to setting up the National Payments Corporation of India, or NPCI, in 2008. All of these steps were crucial groundwork for that explosive UPI launch in 2016. But if you had to point to the one thing that really lit the fuse, it's this, the Jam Trinity. Think about it. John Donne gave millions of people a bank account for the first time. Aadhaar gave them a secure digital identity, and the mobile phone boom gave them access. It created the perfect storm, the perfect ecosystem for something like UPI to just take off. Okay, here's a pro tip for your exam answers. Using a framework shows you have a structured way of thinking. The RBI report uses something called the National Innovation Systems, or NIS, framework. And I've got a super easy mnemonic for you to remember its 4 parts. Just think, to ACE Indian payments, remember TAPE. That's T for technology, A for agents like banks and fintechs, I for institutions like the RBI, and P for policy. TAPE. Simple, right? All right, let's get to the really fun part in Section 3, the numbers. This is where the story goes from impressive to just staggering. And trust me, these data points are pure gold for your answers. I mean, just look at this chart. The growth is, well, it's almost vertical. Back in 2013-14, we were at about 2,400 crore digital transactions. Fast forward a decade to 2023-24, and that number is over 1.6 lakh crore. That's a compound annual growth rate, a CAGR, of 52%. 52% growth year on year for an entire decade. It's just explosive. So what's behind that explosion? Well, this chart says it all. It's UPI. Look at that dominance. It makes up nearly 80% of all retail payment volumes. It's not just another option anymore. For millions of Indians, it has become the default way to pay for things, leaving everything else in the dust. And hey, we're not just talking about small everyday purchases. The sheer economic value flowing through the UPI network is colossal. It went from just under 9 lakh crore rupees in 2019 to an unbelievable 200 lakh crore in 2024. This shows that UPI isn't just a cool convenience, it's a systemically critical piece of India's economic machinery. And that leads us perfectly into Section 4. Let's talk about that widespread economic impact, because this whole revolution is about so much more than just easily paying for your coffee. It's changing the very fabric of our economy. The RBI report really zooms in on 3 huge areas of impact. First, it's a massive boost for financial inclusion. Second, it's making it easier for people and small businesses to get credit. And third, and this is a big one, it's completely changing how the government provides support to its citizens. And this table right here, this is proof of that last point. By using what's called direct benefit transfer, or DBT, the government can send money straight to people's bank accounts, cutting out middlemen and reducing corruption. And look at the savings. Over 1.8 lakh crore saved in the public distribution system alone. Add it all up, and the government has saved nearly 3.5 lakh crore rupees. That is a phenomenal amount of money being used more efficiently. Okay, but for a really strong, well-rounded exam answer, you can't just talk about the good stuff. You have to show you understand the full picture, challenges and all. So in Section 5, we're going to look at the hurdles that are still on the road ahead. The report is pretty clear about the key challenges. Financial literacy is still a major gap we need to fill. There's a big digital divide between our cities and villages. Cybersecurity threats like phishing scams are a constant battle. And of course, we need to make sure the tech infrastructure can keep up with this insane growth without crashing. Acknowledging these points shows real critical thinking. And now we've reached the final stretch, Section 6. This is your ultimate exam revision guide. We've boiled down everything from this entire chapter into the most critical points that you just have to remember. Ready? First things first, the jargon. Make sure you know these terms inside out. UPI, A to A, RTP, the JAM Trinity, the NIS framework, PIDF, DBT, and of course, CBDC. These are your essential keywords. Next up, the data. You don't need to remember everything, but these 5 are absolute showstoppers. The 45 crore daily UPI transactions, that nearly 80% share of retail payments, the 52% 10-year growth rate, the massive DBT savings of almost 3.5 lakh crore, and the RBI's Financial Inclusion Index score. These numbers will make your answers pop. And finally, the big ideas, the core concepts that tie this whole story together. Remember these 4 things. 1. India treated its digital payment system as a public good, not just a for-profit business. 2. Interoperability was the magic ingredient. 3. It was a fantastic example of a public-private partnership. And 4. The entire mission was driven by the idea of inclusion-led growth. So, I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder. As the whole world now looks to India as the gold standard for digital payments, what do you think is the single most important lesson other countries can learn from our journey? Was it the technology, the policy choices, or something else entirely? A great question to think about. That's all for today. All the very best for your exams.